Here.
Counselor Whitney.
Here.
Counselor Forcom.
Here.
Counselor Barenboim.
Here.
Counselor Holler.
Here.
Thank you. Just so the audience knows, we're here for both a work session and a business meeting. The first part will be a work session. It will be by far probably the longest portion of it, so please bear with us. We are not going to take public comment during the work session. It's a time for council to learn more about the water project, and that's all. Anything, council? Any corrections or additions to the agenda? I don't think so. Okay. Sir, Ed, you are up.
Okay. Outstanding. I have, as always, I like to generate paper, so I have another.
Do you want a microphone at all?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Is that working for you guys?
As long as council can hear you.
Yeah, can council hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have a handout to start with, and I want to do a couple things. First, I want to talk a little bit about myself, which is always one of my favorite subjects. And then I want to talk a little bit about the water system. And then what I want to do is just run you folks through this entire project that we're currently finishing up. So you get a little bit of a broad overview of what's been done in the last couple of years. So for starters, as I always say when I come down here, I'm Edward Hodges. I'm a partner, a half owner of a company called Curran McLeod up in Portland. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my company just for 2 or 3 minutes so you have an idea of what we do and who we are. Because I've been working here quite a while now, almost 15 years. We have 10 employees. We do nothing but municipal work. We do small rural communities all over Oregon and Washington, and we extend out to Idaho. The smallest client that I have is the city of Antelope, Oregon, which some of you might be familiar with the Rajneesh a few years ago, and they have 47 people. Our largest client is the city of Canby, Oregon, which I think now is about 12,000 folks. And so, and we specialize particularly in water, wastewater. We also do streets. We do other types of infrastructure, stormwater. We write a lot of municipal law. We look for funding. It's just if you have a problem or an issue as a small community, you know, it involves engineering or funding or planning, we do our best to try and solve it for you. So that's who I am, and that is who Curran McLeod is, your current city engineer. So, and do you have any questions, by the way? Don't hesitate to stop me, because then I can also breathe. I run out of air when I talk. So I have a question for all of you, and I'm not in any way trying to come off as flip or something. Do you all know how the water system works in this city?
In general, I
In
do.
general.
In general, I do. I don't know.
Turn on the faucet, it's supposed to come out.
And I'm sorry, I'm gonna lose my voice if I talk, I promise I won't. But Ed, while you're talking, would you give us a little background, your educational background and your engineering background?
Oh gosh, okay. I have, education. I'm not proud of it, but I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry. And I also have what's called a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. And I did attend the University of Vermont. I was in their master's program for a year or two, and then I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to get out and work, and that's all I've ever done since. I've been a practicing engineer now for 25 years. I'm licensed as a licensed professional engineer in the state of Oregon, the state of Washington, the state of Idaho, and the state of Vermont. I've had licensure now for, I think, 18 years, and during that time period I've worked particularly with water on just about any type of project you can imagine. I've built treatment plants, pipelines, pump stations, dams, reservoirs, anything to do with water, I've done it. And I've also had a pretty extensive background in wastewater as well, sort of the same with treatment plants, collection systems, and the like. I spent a lot of time looking for money. That's something I really like to do, as well as the engineering, but the problems are everywhere in all these communities. That's easy to find. The money is the issue, and that's how you make it happen. So that's a little bit more about me and what I like to do. Does that work for you?
Thank you.
Okay. But back to my question is, are you all just basically familiar with the water system here and how it works? If someone says, well, where do you get your water? Where does it go? What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to be flip. You know, it's going to start because...
Well, all I know is, the wells and stuff like this, and pumps up there and comes down, I guess, you know.
Copy that. Well, yes.
That's a great understanding.
I would say I'm confused on which wells we use and which ones we're not currently using.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. So if you don't mind, it's just going to take a minute and just go over our existing water system today. And so water systems break down into your source, treatment if you need it, conveyance, which is the pipes, how it goes through pumping and storage. So right now, the source for your water system is the well field up on Salmon Creek. And in that well field are 6 wells. However, of that 6, 2 of them are abandoned and we don't use them at all. We have 4 wells today that provide water to the city. You can turn them on to pump water to your system. And those wells are 1, 2, 4, and 6. The wells that are run the most are 4, which is run continuously, and we're going to be talking about that later tonight. And well number 2, which is that is the workhorse of your system. It's a big 10-inch well, and when things are good, when it's really clicking, it can produce up to 800 gallons a minute. It's a very good production source. So the bottom line is you have these 4 wells, and they pump out through a collection of piping that runs through your city, and they're initially set to pump up to an old steel tank on the west side of town. As well as that tank, they also pump up to a pump station on Oak Street, and that in turn pumps to a very high tank that's up above town, which you folks can see. And so up until this project, the town was fed off of 2 what we call zones. And so anyone who lived below, and Robert, help me out here. Robert is, by the way, I'm sure most of you folks know Robert of Public Works, and he's actually the guy who really knows how this thing works. But anyway, your system essentially in town is fed down through here by that western tank. When you pump water up to it, it comes back in. Folks who live up above are fed by the big 1,000,000-gallon tank that's on top. And then when you have any sort of emergency or water, gets short, that tank, that 1,000,000-gallon tank up top, starts returning water back down the system. And so it keeps you guys at a constant pressure. So you don't, essentially don't know that where water's coming or going. It's just always there. We also now have a 3rd tank. Before we didn't, and that serves the industrial park, and it serves essentially a large part of the town that's located on the south side of Salmon Creek. And to do that, again, you pump water out of the well field, it goes across to a new pump station in the industrial park, and then the pump station kicks it up to the new reservoir. All of these elements talk to each other through a system we call SCADA, which is Supervisory Command Acquisition Data. Is that it? Data acquisition, yeah. And so everything's wired together, and so all these elements feed off of each other. When one tank is short, the other tank will tell the wells to kick on, feed water to it. And that essentially is how your system works right now. Now, in terms of treatment, you're pumping water out of the ground. So the only thing that we do for you folks down here is when the water is pumped out of the ground in the well field, it goes through a series of pipes that are called contact chambers. And prior to going in those pipes, we pump in a little bit of chlorine, and then it takes some time to work its way through them. And that chlorine makes sure that all the bacteria and viruses that could possibly be in the well water is killed before it comes into your system. The concentration of chlorine we pump in is about 1 part per million. So it's not a lot, but it's definitely there. And that, in essence, is your town water system. Is that absolutely clear?
I'd like to ask some, on the tank that's on that side, how old is this old tank you're talking about?
It was built, the west side tank, Councilor Hadley, was built in 1962, and it was
Not the old one.
the old railroad tank.
No, I'm not talking about the old one, the
Yeah.
one that we put in about 7, 8 years ago.
Oh, that was put in 2007, and it was commissioned, I think, at the end of that year.
Is that the Oak Street one?
No, the Oak Street one would
We call
be,
that the East Reservoir, and it's
Yeah.
up on top of Laurel Butte Road.
Oh, okay.
yeah. But the Oak Street tank would be the old,
The old Oak Street tank was a concrete tank that had been decommissioned.
The railroad
It
tank.
had no, the railroad tank is still standing.
okay.
The concrete tank was decommissioned about 9 years ago. Public Works took that completely out.
Okay. So anyway, that's a brief summary of the existing water system, just so you understand how it works. Now, I'd like to talk just a little bit about the water project that we're currently working on, and we're just about finished. And so let me give you a little bit of background about this project. It really started actually back in 2004. There was a master plan done by an engineer who I worked under at the time that looked at the existing system in Oakridge, and quite frankly, it was in pretty poor shape. A lot of your pipes were rotting. You had effectively no storage. The wells had a lot of old equipment in them, and they didn't work together. There was no SCADA system. For example, at that time, your loss, I think, was close to 50%. So for every gallon you pumped, half a gallon just went out of the pipes. Would you agree with that?
Yes, that's.
Robert, it was kind of a mess, actually. And so the plan looked at, well, what are the things that need to be done first? And identified that you needed more storage and you need to fix some of your pipes, and then you need to put some new equipment in the well field. So in 2007, there was a big project. I think we spent like $3.2 million total, and we did a couple of things. The old west tank that was built in 1962, that operated for a year, and then the bottom hillside dropped out from underneath it, and so we had to pull it. It was pulled out of service and sat for 40 years, I think, or no, 50.
Pretty much its entire life.
Its entire life,
Until
yeah.
2007.
Yeah, and it was full of water, but it was effectively useless. And so that tank, we did geotechnical study and figured out that we just rammed in what are called some mini piles underneath it. We could jack it up and bring it back into service. So we brought that 1 million gallon tank back online, and then we built the new 1 million gallon tank, which is up on top of the hill, which is now called that is the East tank.
Reservoir.
Yeah, the East Reservoir. I call it Levitt's Reservoir, but because that's the property owner.
Yeah, Levitt's the one that donated the property.
Yeah, and at the same time, we redid a significant amount of piping in the city to try and cut down the loss, and put in things like generators in the well field, and really got the city, back on track. And made your water system, completely reconfigured the pressure zones, and made your water system significantly better.
To add to that, we went from 162,000 gallons of storage to 2 million.
2 million.
gallons of storage.
Yeah.
Which effectively firefighting, and during the summer months, increased the amount of water we had in storage for fire suppression.
Yeah. So the problem is that, so we got a lot of things done with that project, but there were still 2 areas that really needed to be addressed. And one was your source, because you have these wells, and right away I told you that 2 out of your 6 wells are abandoned. The other 4 have different problems. Unfortunately, some of the problems we're going to talk about later, which we didn't even know about then. And we also needed more storage. You guys need more storage up in the industrial park, because you had no firefighting capacity for industrial growth up there. And you also have a lot of low pressure zones on that side of town that needed to be, brought up so that you wouldn't have problems with contamination coming in the water system. So that was really the next project. So in about 2015, Kerr and McLeod did a study, and we looked at, how are we going to get this done, where were we going to get some funds for it, and came up with there was gonna be a 1 million gallon tank up near Dunning Road. It was near the site. There used to be an old city landfill up there, and we're gonna put the tank right near it, if not on top of it, quite frankly, because it'd be a great place for it. And at the same time, we were looking for where can we find a site for a new well. And we came up with a number of options, one being what I always call the Little Texas site, which is up sort of northeast of the city well field, and then also sites over near Highway 58. And that was the major conclusion of the study. The other thing was, at that time, the city, based on this recommendation, the city went out and got a loan and grant package for $2.6 million, okay? So a year later, the city went out for RFQ on a competitive process to get an engineer for this project. We responded to that RFQ with a number of engineers, and we were the chosen engineer to do the project. We then entered into a contract with the city, and I think we were given notice to proceed in the fall of 2016. Now, what I want to talk about is money. You folks contracted us the sum of $388,300 to perform engineering services for you on this contract. Of that $388,300, right off the bat, about 115 of it goes to subcontractors. We don't mark up our subcontractors. There's some specialty services that were needed. We needed a hydrogeologist to site the well. We also needed, because the new tank's gonna be up on the hillside, and because there's all these new guidelines for engineering, we needed a geotechnical engineer to engineer the tank that we were gonna put up. So these folks cost a lot of money. So we had to pay, you know, that added to the price of the contract. We also needed, I think it was about $40,000 in survey services, because many of the sites were unsurveyed and the property boundaries were undefined, and so that also went to another subconsultant. We ourselves were probably paid about $224,000, which is a lot of money. I'm not saying it isn't, but that was for the course of the entire project, okay? So we started work in September of 2016, and we finished up the design in the summer of 2017. And there were a couple of changes that occurred over the progress of that design. One is that years ago, there's something I was involved with, there were some folks who bought all the property where the tank currently is over there, who are potentially going to run a quarry at some point. And in the process of buying that property, an agreement was worked out with them that we were going to locate the new tank on the old dump site. Well, something changed during design, and we were told by the property owner that no, we couldn't have the tank there, which was a really good place and easy to get down to the industrial park, but we had to put it at the far north end of the property, which meant that we had to build an access road 3,000 feet long through difficult conditions. We then had to run 1,000 extra feet of transmission pipe back down the hill, and it increased the length of our boring under the Union Pacific Railroad by almost 150 feet. We went from a 50-foot boring to almost a 200-foot boring under the Union Pacific Railroad. That added a significant amount of cash to this project, but unfortunately, they own the land, and we don't, and you guys don't, and so we're kind of stuck with it.
One question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So did the city pay for that change, or did the landowner pay for that change?
You guys, unfortunately, that added a lot of cost to the project.
So we
You had to
paid
pay
for
for
that because they wanted it somewhere else?
Yeah, because they wanted it somewhere else. And there's something and that will lead into something I'm gonna talk about when the bid prices come back too. But yeah, no, it's very frustrating, and it's just unfortunate at the time. Other changes that came out of the design is that we also looked at, and we were originally going to upgrade a transmission main, a very old one that comes along Highway 58 as the source of supply to the new tank, and we would have had to redo a pipe across the bridge. There were some other issues that came up, and at that point we decided it was much more efficient and cost effective to run the pipe under the river, and then we just ran it straight up to the industrial park. And I'd still, at this date, think that was a very good change that was done in the design. Okay, so, and then last but not least in the design, we had 2 test borings that were performed looking for a new well site. One was in the Little Texas site, and that turned out to have results that indicated that there was just not good soils for a well there. The second one was downstream on this side of, well, excuse me, on the north side of Salmon Creek, near the community gardens, and that indicated a promising area for a new well. And so that was the site that was selected to install a new well. And so that was essentially some of the elements that came out of the design that were different from the study. So we went ahead and did the project. The project was essentially broken up into 2 segments for bidding. The well was bid by itself because it's very specialized work, and that was bid in June of 2017, and they started work. It was a contractor out of Washington called Carpenter Drilling, and they started, I think, in August, and then drilled the well until, February is when they finished it. The second and the larger part of the project involved the tank, it involved the transmission main, the line under Salmon Creek, the boring underneath the railroad, the new pump station, new SCADA, etc. That was bid to a consortium of general contractors, and a contractor named Lasky Clifton got the low bid for that, and their bid was in October of 2017. Okay? So the bid prices that came back, Lasky Clifton, their bid was $2,164,000. The bid for the well was approximately $224,000. And right at that point, when the bids came back, we were actually over the amount of money that we had loaned, we got the loan and grant for. And that's why I was mentioning that for. Unfortunately, due to that change that had to be made in the old Hazelbell Quarry site, we've always been, since day one, having to go out and look for some more money on this project. And so this has come up a couple times, so I just wanted to let council know why we were kind of starting from behind a bit. Okay, so construction on the big part of the project started November 15th, 2017. And in terms of progress, well, actually, I'll back up. I'll talk about the well first. The well, as I talked to you about, construction ended in February. The well was then developed and tested. At first, we had some issues with the well because it was yielding a lower flow than we anticipated. We wanted to have at least 500 or 600 GPM. It was down around 250. So we came back in and did a sort of high-tech means of what's called development, of when you go in and you push fines out of the well. And that actually was very effective and brought probably 100 gallons a minute more capacity, brought it up to 350 or possibly even 400 over long term, which was, wasn't exactly what we were looking for, but it was a good, solid well for the city. The problem is, unfortunately, none of that really mattered after a while because you were required to do mandatory water quality testing on any new municipal well. We tested that well. It turned out that there was a chlorinated solvent in it called tetrachloroethene, and that solvent was present on the initial testing over what's called the MCL, the maximum contaminant limit, which is the limit that is considered to be healthy or not pose any long-term health risks to drink this compound. We retested it again. It was slightly below that limit, and it was still in the ballpark, and we essentially had to stop working on that well. And we looked at a number of options. The main one was putting in a carbon system called granulated activated carbon to clean this tetrachloroethene out of the well water. And it was so expensive, and also the contractor at that point, there were some other issues which I'll talk about, where I was concerned that we really weren't getting a good price due to bidding. It was at that time where I recommended to City Council that we look at other options. We take this out of the project. So that has been removed from the project at this time. Okay? So moving back to the elements.
May I add to that?
Oh, but please add to that.
Just so you all know, well number 7 is not attached to the distribution system. It is not being
Yes.
pumped into our drinking water whatsoever.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
does that
That's a
mean
good
I
point.
get my property back?
No,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately not.
Okay, moving on to Lasky Clifton's portion of the project. The Reservoir and Access Road, that was started in the sort of the December of 2017, and they went at it during the winter, but then they ran into some problems with weather. They finally got the access road finished around May or June, would you say, Robert? That's what I said in my notes. And unfortunately for them, one of the key things that they were responsible for doing was they needed the tank requires a building permit from Lane County. And Lasky Clifton, essentially, the contractor did not get that building permit. In fact, they didn't even start really working on it until May of 2018. They then actually submitted the application to Lane County in June of that year, of 2018. The building permit came back in August of 2018, which is about a month before the project was supposed to be over. They then started building the project in August. They built the foundation through August and September. They actually got the tank contractor on site. It's a bolted steel tank. You put it together like a big jigsaw puzzle, essentially, bolt everything together. The tank contractor started in November, and we have just now, what day was it last week when we did the leak test?
I can't, two Fridays ago was when we had it sampled.
Yeah.
It came back clean and ready for consumption.
Yeah, so about a week. It was finished up about a week ago. Okay. So the Salmon Creek boring, this is this boring that goes underneath the river. It connects the well field to a transmission line and then goes up to the industrial park to a pump station. That started in February. The contractor thought initially that this boring would take 4 weeks. It was not finished until May. They had a very difficult time getting underneath the river. They had a number of equipment problems, and those issues with the river are described in those 2 booklets that I gave you, and you guys, I hope, didn't throw those out.
Nope.
Excellent, yeah, and that, if you read through that, you will have, as thorough a knowledge as anyone else of the issues that went on with that boring. So anyway, that finished up in May, and then at that point, we moved on, the contractor moved on to work on the pump station and the reservoir transmission main. For some reason, they started work in March of 2018 on the pump station, and then they just stopped. And they did not start work again on the pump station in the industrial park until about August. It was early August of 2018. Their electrical equipment, which was the most important part, is a thing we call a motor control center that runs all the pumps and everything is in the pump station. The controls did not show up until December. I think December 12th is when it showed up. The pump station is now completed, it's online, and that's working too. So that part of the project is finished. For the transmission main, there was a transmission main that needed to go in between the industrial park and then up to the tank. It really had 2 principal components. One was the line itself, which is a 10-inch PVC line that comes down from the tank, runs alongside the railroad, and then goes underneath. Going underneath was what we call a cased bore, and it was completed in accordance with all of Union Pacific standards. That is a 24-inch casing with a 10-inch pipe slid underneath. The contractor initially started working on that boring in May of 2018. There were some issues where they felt that the plans did not show the amount that we had done, showed the amount of soil that was present they would have to excavate. They then pulled off and didn't work on it until the end of July. And we said, you gotta get going on this, no matter what you think. And so that was done in July and finished up in early August. So those are, I know this has been a long road I'm going through here, but I'm trying to give you the start, the history of the design, and then some of the issues that occurred during the construction. Those are sort of the main themes of the project elements that occurred. So right now, we have all of the project is functional. Robert has the industrial park online. The tank is functioning as it should. We have one, small repair, or not a repair, but final thing that has to be done where the controls contractor, these are the folks who make sure that all the elements of the system work together. They have to come in and put the tank in, make sure that it integrates well into the existing control system. And as soon as that is done, the contractor will be granted substantial and then what we call final completion of the project, and it'll be ready to go. So it's essentially finished at this time. Any questions?
So up to $250 a day for every day it was late.
Coming to that. I'll talk about that. So what are the project costs to date and some additional issues that are remaining? You know, unfortunately, due to the issues with the well, right now the project is back at about the cost of the initial, that $2.6 million that you as a city got, the loan and grant. I think we're about 50,000 over, and the city has applied to extend the loan. It's a long-term loan. It's 1% interest for 30 years. And that has been granted. But essentially now, you're coming in exactly in terms of your rates where you were supposed to be. You're not going to really see a change in rates at this time from this project. If we just stop at this time. So overall, and I have a cost summary. I always bring one down. It's included with this handout. It shows all the costs that I'm aware of the project.
So Ed,
Yes.
you said, so we won't see a change of rate. We potentially won't see a change of rate if we stop at this time. What do you mean by that?
I'll get to that in a second. But I'm not saying, it's just there's some other options now with what the city is potentially going to have to do moving forward. So right now your costs or your rates are good, and your costs, due to the fact that we took some of the components out involved with that well that didn't work out of the project, it came back to where it was originally estimated. The additional issues remaining with the project are, one, the contractor was supposed to finish on September 15th, and they didn't. So every day after September 15th, until I grant what's called substantial completion, which I've not granted as of yet, but I anticipate any day I will, the city is allowed to collect what's called liquidated damages. It's a penalty of $250 a day. So if you collect liquidated damages for every day that they're over their substantial completion date, you're up to about $37,750 right now that you just take right out of the contractor's retainage. And so that's one issue. It's not necessarily a bad one, but it's there. Now, the other issues are, and I talked about this last time I was here, the contractor has filed 3 claims on this job. And those claims were all described in the summaries that I gave you. They are essentially, though, there's a claim for extra expenses getting the boring under the river. There's a claim for extra expenses involved with the boring that went under the railroad. And last of all, there is an undefined claim for alleged delays caused by the engineer and the owner.
Owner being the city.
The owner being the city, exactly, thank you.
The engineer being.
Me, yeah. The person talking. These claims, I'm not happy that we're in this situation, but my feeling is they are with very little merit. And I don't really see them, I can't make it an absolute guarantee. I'm just not sure how they're going to go anywhere. And what I would see happening is that the city will just wait, because we don't really have to do, you folks don't have to do anything. They're the folks who want to get these claims. Eventually, the longer time goes by, the harder it gets for the claims to be processed. And I think eventually things will shake out in mediation that most of these claims, if not all, will go away to a large degree. That is, and I know I'm going on a limb on saying this, but I've unfortunately been involved in a lot of litigation in construction, and these ones in particular are you know, kind of head scratching to me. I think going back to the initial bid, Lasky Clifton underbid the job by about $500,000, and they lost a lot of money. And so I think they were looking for ways to get that money back, and that's where these claims came out of. An example would be the claim for time.
So, can I ask a question? Has Lasky Clifton then been paid for their job?
Yeah, they're paid.
They are paid.
Yeah, they are paid.
Okay, so it's not like can or would withhold money from them for payment.
What we have is, the only thing we can withhold from them legally is you have 5% retainage. So if a contract amount is $1 million, you're allowed to withhold $50,000. That's state law, and it's basically used as a lever for any construction project, public project.
So did we withhold that $50K?
Every bit of it.
Okay.
Yeah, every pay request has a 5% holding. I think right now the city has about a little over $100,000 of retainage withheld.
All right, thank you.
Okay, just in a brief summary though. For example, the claim for time, you know, costs involved with time delays incurred by the engineer and the city. What Lasky Clifton told us in a meeting was, I said, well, you haven't defined these claims. They said, well, we don't really know what these delays are. I think, Robert, you and Rick were sitting right at the meeting. This is a new one on me after 25 years of construction. We don't know what these claims are, but we think it's going to be a $60,000 amount that we want. And so, okay, all right, well, you know, we'll see where that goes. So anyway, the reason I'm harping on these claims is that, as I said to you guys last month, I don't think anyone knew about this. I mean, this wasn't information that's being withheld by us. If you look at that information packet that I gave you, you can see the dates on the letters that, you know, bad news is not something in my position you want to keep from people. You got to get it to the owner immediately. I'm not sure why that knowledge wasn't pushed on to the city council, but now you have it, and I just want to make sure you guys are always.
This is a new council.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
And it was pushed on to the old council in bits and pieces as it came through.
Yeah, okay.
You know, it wasn't like it was not knowledge. I mean, some
Good.
of the things such as the building permits, as they're permitted that weren't obtained, and then we had to wait for those to come through.
Yeah.
You know, that was kind of some of the. I guess what I can say is some of the implications of all of that weren't as clear as they should
That's
be.
kind of okay.
But it's not that they weren't notified. They were.
Okay, outstanding. And again, I'm not looking to
Absolutely.
blame or
No.
anything, but this is the kind of information you guys need to know.
Right.
So.
One of the
Okay.
things I'd like to ask, on the
Yeah.
boarding underneath the river, underneath Salmon Creek, did you know all the rocks and all that stuff was put in there in '63?
Where were the rocks?
Right there where you did the drilling. In '63, when the flood went out, it blew the whole river out.
Mm-hmm.
They brought all them rocks and all that stuff that they drilled through. It was put in there, and Eddie Roberts went in there and filled that river bank back in there.
Which side?
The whole thing, right there where the dike is almost. See, the Corps of Engineers did that.
Yeah.
Put it in later, but Eddie is the one that filled all the rocks and filled that back in, so there was foundation, so it didn't go over there in the weld field where you are now.
Right.
It didn't flow into there. He put that in there, and so that stuff was underneath there.
We did dig right on the north side, we dug a 25-foot hole to look at the soils that were there. And it was all native bank run. There was no imported material, nothing. And the boring depth itself was 40 feet down.
Right.
So I think it was well
where
below.
it went in, where you guys went on, it would be on the east side, I guess, on that side where all the rebar and all the stuff was laying.
That's from the big, right, exactly.
Okay, when that was
Yeah.
all, they pushed a lot of that stuff years ago back in there.
And I
Is
think
that
what
what-
is,
All that
what is
stuff
the depth of that?
Is that what hurt
on
the?
No.
the south side of Salmon Creek?
Yeah.
All of that concrete and stuff was put in there in the flood of '96.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't in 65, it was 96, and that was all put on the surface.
Yep.
And in about 2004, I believe, we had somebody come up here, rebuild the levee in 3 locations.
Yeah, that was down on the bottom side.
Yeah, well, no, it was right there where they were at, and all of that concrete was pulled out of the levee and built back into the proper fashion, which was done with crushed rock, class 3000 riprap, the big rocks that you're talking about. But that's just over the top of a pit run foundation.
Right, but
Yeah,
that's one of
it's
the
all
things
in
I
there.
went over there and looked when that was being drilled, and I seen the head laying there with all the chain and stuff wrapped around that thing.
Right, but all that rock, or that concrete that you see is just on the surface, and they knew
Yeah,
that was
no,
there.
and that was no, exactly.
None of
It
that
was
was
like-
ever hidden, and they knew
Pulled
that.
that out, they should have pulled, somebody should have pulled it out.
Yeah, no, that was, no, I agree, because it is disconcerting, when you see all that concrete there with rebar, and but the thing is, it's just on the surface. And, you know, it was there before the boring was done. The bottom line is that, like, in terms of that claim, the claim is that there was somehow a change in conditions from what we showed in our drill logs. I just put all the drill logs for the well field and said, this is what you're gonna encounter out there. And to date, we have not seen any evidence that the driller encountered anything different to that. And they certainly did not, you know, as they were going, Councilor Hadley, underneath each side of the dike, they were quite deep. They were 25 minimum feet, sometimes 30, 35. Yeah, it was pretty steep. So, okay. So, any more questions? And then I'll wrap this up. And I hope I didn't go on too long.
No, you're fine.
Okay. So here's my summary. Right now, the project there's 3 things about it. One is, it works, the portions that we built work really well. And I'm really pretty fired up for you guys. You know, the pipe underneath the river has done just a significant amount of good for what's called the system hydraulics. The water just, now from the well field, just flies over there for that entire industrial park, for that entire side of town. And it makes such a difference because up until now, you have a potential for a lot of water use up in the industrial park that was served by basically a little straw, an old 6-inch pipe located on Highway 58. And the water had to go all the way through the system, come around, and come back up to get to the park. And now it's like you have this big tunnel that just shoots water right to the industrial park. And so it's made a significant improvement to your system. Second of all, the pump station is, there were no issues with controls, no issues with electrical, the pumps work well, the tank works well. So, and I think, Robert,
We're
really happy.
operating it right now as we speak in hand operation mode until we get the SCADA guys up here to
do that
put all
last.
the SCADA online and automate it.
Yeah. So, and normally what I've found in these situations is, you know, you have a project where there's issues with the contractor and there's claims, and then the project doesn't work. That's usually what happens. So this project works well, and I feel like we really improved the water system as a result. So that's number 1. Number 2 is we do have these outstanding claims. Like I said, I don't know where they're going to go, but I feel that based on my experience that they really are without merit, and it's going to be very difficult for the contractor to actually get a lot of money out of the city to prosecute these. I have a feeling they're just going to wither around. That's what they normally do. There'll be some mediation, and they will essentially go away. There may have to be a small amount of money paid, or some money paid. I don't know how much, but that's what I would see happening over time. Okay.
How long do they have to, before their claims no longer valid?
You know, I think it's 2 years. If nothing happens in 2 years, then the claims expire. Although I'm not 100% on that. Okay. So the last issue, though, that is, and this ties into what we're going to talk about, is that unfortunately, what the project has shown, though, is that you do have this trichlora theme. You know, there were 1 or 2 little blips of it in your well field. 2 times in 20 years, a little bit showed up in the sampling. And now, unfortunately, with the new well, it's clear that there is, you know, I don't know where it's coming from, I don't know how extensive it is, but it definitely is spread throughout your water in the city. And so unfortunately, you know, the city, in terms of dealing with your source, you know, the job's not over here. And that's, it's very unfortunate, but it is the way it is. And so that, in a sense, that's the overall summary I have of the project at this time. I think that's item 5.1.
So Ed,
Yes. You just grab this mirror.
so when you had said earlier that we are at this point over, but I had said, so what do you mean at this time? And you said further on, you would tell me. So what you're saying is that as we proceed from here on forward, any charges that we incur are over and above what we anticipated, because we've kind of sort of maxed out where we are in
They
general.
are. Yeah, and
Isn't that basically what you're saying? You started at $57,000 short.
yeah, it's
Right.
it's basically come up as the project's gone. Yeah,
Okay.
and so you know, it's unfortunately it's something to think about in the future. If really it pertains to if something major has to be done, like, you know, the worst case scenario would be building a surface water treatment plant or something of that nature. That would cause you to raise rates.
So when you said that a carbon filter system to filter out the whatever triethylene chlorine,
chlorinated.
something,
Yeah,
is really expensive. When you said really expensive, what do you mean really expensive?
it was just for the one well. It was, I believe it was around $270,000 to do that. And then you have the operational costs of it, which
They're
are
the
about
ongoing expenses.
$15,000 a year. And that's just one well.
That's just one well.
Yeah, if you were looking at doing it for multiple wells in your system, the carbon very quickly becomes even more expensive. You know, you'd be talking about $1 million.
Right, okay.
On the wells where you got the two that's you pulling, how far are all the wells apart?
Let's see.
Where the contamination is?
You know, Councilor Hadley, so the new well, well number 7.
Robert, no?
The well number 7, the newest well that has the highest level of TCE, is about 1,000 feet away from well number 4.
So basically,
Which
they're
puts it about
Yeah.
800 feet away from well number 2.
Well number 2. Yeah.
all pretty in the
So-
same area.
So
They're
it-
fairly close, yeah.
Yeah, but they're, the well 7 having the highest levels is the furthest away from the other wells. Well number 1 showed a hit, back in September, at the 0005, what is that? Yeah, the lowest detectable amount that they can test for. And then well number 4 had, consistent hits of, .00081, and a highest of 00102. The levels of TCE in 4 aren't even close to the levels of TCE in well number 7.
Yeah, they do well,
They're 1,000
unfortunately.
feet apart.
Okay, so have we seen a more consistent hits of that in the last year and a half than we have in the past?
We are seeing these hits on number 4 because the last council has directed us to test each well once a month for 6 months, so we did that. We found that well number 4 is the only one that is producing this TCE
Okay.
at that level.
Mm-hmm.
When we're required by the law to test our wells, we're only required to test at the entry point. So we test after chlorination, and that's all the wells pumping into the system. Then we test, send a sample in, we get the sample back saying there's nothing in there. Well, depending on which wells are running at the time, will,
Change that.
Exactly.
the dilution,
Exactly.
it will dilute and you won't detect it, but by direction of council, we were actually testing each and every well, and that's where we found that well number 4 is the problem.
So,
Is
but
one
the
of the
testing
problems.
that comes out after it's treated and ready to go into the city is undetectable.
90% of the time, yes, non-detect.
All right. So when you talked about a carbon filter system, you said on one well.
Mm-hmm.
Would you put the carbon filter system on the point of entry into the system rather than on the well?
If you're gonna decontaminate or get rid of the TCE, I would suggest, if we're gonna keep well 4, to put it on the entire system.
Right.
Because if it's in well 4
It's gonna be an
and
old,
well 7, and if we are putting well 7 online,
okay,
yes, over time, there is a possibility that it does get into the other wells.
okay,
It's a very large chunk of money, and it's gonna be.
Yeah, that's,
so it just makes more sense to do
It's
that.
almost up there
You
in the
could
same
make
range
this money.
of building a surface water
Right.
treatment facility.
So now we're at the point where, it's time to look at, doing the new test well, because
Yeah.
we still need another well.
But
That's-
the new test well, you're sure that's gonna be good too?
We don't know until
no,
we test
no,
it.
no,
That's
That's
right.
the
No,
whole
I-
point of the test well.
Boy,
That's why it's a test well.
yeah,
That's
yes,
the real
yes,
plan.
I wish, Bobby, go ahead.
Can you clearly define exactly what we need to do from here and what's needed to make this 100% complete?
in terms of, source.
Mm,
Or how do you mean, in terms of the water project, or?
To finish the water project to the point where we originally wanted it to be.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm looking at, yeah, the big.
yep, no, exactly, so really the big picture now is how to address, unfortunately, we're almost worse off now with source than we were before starting the project, but we do know a lot more, that's the good news.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah. What you need to do though, what I feel, and this is really, it's your decision, this is not, I'm not getting any advantage out of telling you this, is you really have 3 options, 4 actually. The first option is you just do nothing and continue to run the system, and you'll have these low levels of TCE, maybe occasionally showing up in the entry point. And you don't do anything with well number 7, and it is what it is. Your second option is that, and I think this is the way to go, is that we try one last place to look for another source, another groundwater source, which is over in Highway 58. And again, this is based off of a geological study that we had done for the preliminary engineering report. And give that a shot and see if we could get a well that, one, is uncontaminated with this compound, and 2, has a good yield, and then you have water, more source water coming into your system, and it's some distance away from the well field. So if it gets worse at the well field, if it's clean, maybe it stays clean. It gives you a little bit more protection. I can't make any guarantees at this point, but I would recommend
Option,
doing
wait a
it.
minute, he has 3 options.
Yeah.
You said.
Yeah, that's the second. Your third is, and you do that. If that doesn't work, then you start to look, unfortunately, at the more expensive options, and you look at either, as you guys were just talking about, and Robert, you suggested either putting this carbon system on your whole system, which is very expensive, or the worst case scenario is the city does have old water rights, and we start to pull water out of Salmon Creek, and we'd have to construct a treatment plant.
Could you pull the water out of Salt Creek?
No, they took, that, right?
I walked that whole thing the other day and took pictures of it all.
I wish we
can't
could.
take it out of there.
Yeah, we can't.
So we can't, so they lost that?
That Pope and Talbot water right got taken away by the Department of Water Resources.
So we'd have to use Salmon Creek.
Salmon Creek, yeah.
So 2 of the questions I had coming in to this had to do with water rights and exactly how all of these wells impact that as you shut down wells and turn on wells or don't use wells. Does that impact our water rights in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in the short term, what you have is several groundwater rights, and you've got a lot of capacity in that, which you as a city own and can't be taken away. But it's important that you do what in the jargon that the water resource people use, that you exercise these rights. You continue to pull water out of the ground, you have equipment there. What I see happening over the long term, because this is what happened with all the surface water rights. Many years ago, when people were just coming here, the state was in the business of giving people water all the time. They wanted to get it out, spread it. Since the 70s, that has changed, and now it's the opposite. And they're in the business of trying to take water rights away because water is becoming so scarce. That has affected surface water rights significantly. Basically, if you don't use the surface water right now, the state will take it away over time. I see over time that happening, you know, and not tomorrow, but maybe a couple decades, that process is gonna start to happen with your groundwater rights. So it benefits you to have more wells, and so you can continue to use the water, and then the state doesn't.
But if you have a well that's, like, earlier we have two that's been abandoned,
Mm-hmm.
how does that impact the water rights?
Those wells are still poked in the ground. There's still a well there.
Yeah.
An abandoned
Yeah.
well basically is a well that's been filled in with either bentonite or concrete. That is what we call an abandoned well. These other two that we have, well number 5 and well number 3, are still intact, but we're not using them.
So they're just inactive.
They're inactive wells.
Yeah, and we actually, sorry to interrupt, Robert, we did that delivery. What we did is we just disconnected them from the system, but in terms of the water right, they're still there.
Okay.
And so they're still maintaining what's called the use of the water right. Yeah, if we filled them up with cement, then that would negatively affect your groundwater right.
But is there any way to use the water that actually comes out of Salmon Creek? Rather than fish like the fish hatchery there where that water flow comes out of there? Could that
You'd have to build a surface treatment.
You just have to,
facility,
yeah,
which you're looking up into the tens of millions.
Well, I would say tens, but a lot. You know, more money. I mean, I've worked my whole career here to keep you guys away from surface water treatment. It's just, it's so dang expensive.
It's very expensive.
And it's a couple, for each million gallons a day that you produce, it's a couple $1 million. And that's when, you know, I know you're concerned about rates here. That's when all of a sudden you see your rates increasing $20-$30 per month per person. And that's not where we want to go.
And isn't surface water one of the reasons Salem had so many issues this last summer of don't drink the water?
Yeah, that's correct. They had
I know, but it's because as the temperatures heat up, doesn't that impact your surface water and create more bacteria?
It does. He said they pull out of a different type, you know, lake source, and so the issue they had, I don't see you having.
How about the pipe in the Hills Creek? Is that still there?
I don't know.
Yes, we do still have.
Yeah, he would.
15 inch.
Still have a tap in Hills Creek Reservoir.
So we could get, if we need.
Oh, up at the
Yes.
right. We do
I
have
know there
that.
was a 15-inch pipe. I believe
Yes.
that's what it was.
It is a 15-inch pipe that we have.
All right, Bobby, go
I
ahead.
have kind of a different question.
No worries.
So as I was reading through the material at home, I noticed that for test well number 3, you said a 6-inch casing.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I was looking at test well number 1 and all the material, it was an 8-inch. Why?
You know, I looked at the luck that we had. I think test well, I would have to go back and look because I know the other test well number 2 was. It may have started out as an 8-inch, but it will what's called telescope. It'll go down to 6 inches. You get deeper, and I'm pretty sure well number 1 was that way. Test well number 1.
Test well number 1 was a 6-inch well, drilled all the way down.
Yeah.
And test well number 2 was also a 6-inch casing, drilled all the way down.
Well, I read 8 in the paper.
You know, I would have to
Once
look.
the well becomes developed and actually becomes a well, then they will enlarge that casing.
Yeah.
Production.
Okay.
Thanks, Robert.
Yep.
So counselors, this is your opportunity to get as much information as you can. We have, once we move into the business section, we have 2 motions that we need to consider. The reason we had Ed come is so that he can answer those questions so that you can be more informed about making the decisions you need to make. So Paul.
You recommend that we do this test well, and what are we gonna do with it? I mean, if it's no good, we just basically waste the money, but.
Yeah. Yes and yes.
Do we have the money to do that?
Yeah. Remember that, as I was saying to you guys last month, that, it's 37,000, but right off the bat, 20,000 of it is grant. So it's actually 17,000.
We've got that money out.
Yeah, and there is, your water fund can absorb that without changing your rates.
That's, the rates are pretty important.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
no, that's what makes everything go.
Yes, it is, Counselor.
Yeah.
Bobby.
And so, one thing that I was curious of is the status of all the wells, as in their lifespan, where they are, and kind of how functional they are, and what we can anticipate to see from them in the future. Because if we're looking at doing a test well, but we have 4 wells that really can function for a long time and do well, maybe we don't want to do this, or maybe our other wells are not looking
So I think
well.
what you're asking is what is the importance of of drilling a test well now in anticipation that we can make a well there? How important is it that we have that other well?
That is part of the question, but
Okay.
really I am looking for how those other wells look.
Are functioning?
Yeah,
Life expectancy?
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
basically.
Well, that's a really good question, Councilor Whitley. And right now, well, for example, well number 6 is in great shape. We reconditioned it a couple of years ago, put in a new pump, put in a new motor, and it went from 300 gallons a minute to 600 gallons a minute, which was its original capacity. Well number 4 is, in terms of equipment and yield, it's solid. It's a low yield well. It's about 150 gallons a minute, plus or minus, Robert.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it does, we now know that is the primary source of low-level trichloroethene into your well field. That's where it all comes out of. Well number 1, it was refurbished a number of years ago. That's another big production well, and I think you'll probably get good service out of that for another, what do you think?
We got another 20 years.
20
before
years?
We have to recondition that well.
Yeah, the real issue that we see is well number 2, which, if you remember earlier, I said it's the workhorse of your system. That well needs a complete refurbishment. The motor's very old, the pump shaft is very old, and it's our intent always was to get this water project done. We have a new well, everything be hunky dory, and then we come back around and we can take that well off the line and do some work on it and get it back into shape.
Could we do that now? I mean, would we have the capacity with what we have now if we had to repair number 2 to continue to provide water at the level we are now?
If we get it done this winter, yes, I could do it right now. But if we try to do it in the summertime, we will not have enough water.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
And well number 2 is also a generated well. Basically, when the power goes out,
It
generator
goes.
kicks on, and it is one of the only wells that supply you with drinking water when you turn the faucet on.
Oh, so during the winter when we lose power?
Exactly.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
we use a lot less water during the winter time. We have 3 million gallons in reserve. Well number 1 would be able to keep up
Okay.
during the winter months because we're only using 400,000 gallons a day. Summer months, we're using 1 million gallons a day.
Do you lay awake at night worrying that that well is going to go down?
Every single day.
Even I do, in Portland. We've been worried about it all the time. That was,
It's one of my biggest fears.
yeah.
Yes.
It would qualify in engineering jargon as a catastrophic failure.
And if it does fail and I have to go into emergency mode, I will be having to pull funds from somewhere to get it back
get it done.
online.
Okay.
Because of public health.
Thank you. How you doing, council? Any more questions?
Can you continue on? You were listing out what the progress status is of each well. And number 3 would have been the next one.
Number 3 is it was CO2, right?
Yes,
And long ago, and I'm not trying to flip here, I understand it was running, and the mayor at that time had bought a huge new fish tank, and all the fish died in it because that was the only well on it, and it had a bunch of CO2 in it, and it depleted the oxygen of the water in the fish tank. The bottom line is that you just can't. It produces like this bubbly, fizzy water that screws up the water system.
Can we sell it?
I've always thought about that.
It has been looked
It's-
into,
yeah.
but the levels of CO2 weren't high enough
Right.
for the bottling company that was interested.
Yep.
Oh, bubbles.
Yeah.
So
You
it's
can't
high
do
enough
like
to
light
not be-
bubbles?
Yeah, it's high enough to not work in drinking water, but
Yeah.
it's low enough to not sell and make money.
Darn. Okay.
Yeah.
However, there are treatment processes that can take the CO2 out, which are available. So, if we do get to a point where we absolutely have to use that, we are going to have to spend a lot more money to make that water drinkable.
So no.
But it is available.
So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Where's 5?
Now 5, the primary issue with 5, and again, Robert, tell me where I'm going off the tracks, but these wells are all close together out in that well field.
Well,
They all-
4, 5, and 6 are within 150 feet of each other.
Yep, and they fight with each other. When
Yeah, I
you
bet.
run them, basically you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And 5 was, in particular, you turn that on, and all of a sudden the yield would go down from the other wells that are running, and it would drop the water level in the well to the point where you start to pull oxygen
into the system, which really screws up the water system. It's basically hard to function, not impossible to function.
Okay.
So well for the number 5 for that reason was also taken offline.
Okay.
Why were all of them so close together anyway?
You know, I wasn't there.
They were all-
I don't. Yeah, no, they were all. You know, they were drilled from. I think well number 1 and 2 were put in the 50s. Robert.
I cannot give you that answer.
I think it is. That's what I remember. And then through the 60s, well number 6 was drilled in '84, the last one. And yeah, I figured we're getting water. Let's just
keep putting holes in the ground.
Let's drill here.
I mean, if you have that many wells, you should have them spread out, I would think.
That's another part of our logic of trying to get the well number 7 was almost 1,000 feet away, and now if we did do the test well over at the highway, is to try and get a well that's at least a little ways distance from this whole, conglomerate of wells that you have.
Well, the nice thing about the wells that we have is they're all drilled in river rock. We're basically in one big river basin at the tail end of an old, what do you call it, glacier.
Glacier awful.
So it's very porous. The aquifers down here are full of a lot of water. It's just getting to the right level of river rock or the right location to get that good pocket of good, clean, flowing water in the aquifer. Those pockets do change. As you go drive down the river and you see the river constantly changing shapes, well, that's what's happened over thousands of years, and we just gotta find that happy spot.
Correct. Yeah.
Thanks, Ed.
No
I
problem.
appreciate you haven't gotten much. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Is that the only option to build a test well is right there on Highway 58, or was there other options?
Unfortunately, for all practical purposes, it is. And one of the reasons is, we had this study and we looked at the whole town. And when you drill a municipal well, right off the bat, you have to have a circle that's 100 feet in diameter. So you have to take almost an acre of land around it where there's no sewer lines, there's no dumps, there's various other leach fields, etc. And when you start to do that in Oakridge, all of a sudden it gets really difficult to find that.
So did anybody look at Osprey Park out of curiosity?
That's down at
All the way at the other end.
We did, and it just didn't look. The geology
Was-
didn't look at that good at that point. There was one thing I didn't mention when I was talking about back in the past this project. There was a really good geological study done of this whole valley by a firm called CH2M Hill back in 1991, and they defined the geology fairly well here. And one of the problems is as soon as you get away, and I think this is actually why all the wells are close together, is you get not very far away from where the well field is today, and you just run smack into bedrock. Because it's this deep valley, the sides come up pretty quick. So by the time you get to Highway 58, and that's always been one of my fears, is that's what held us back from drilling over there. Is, well, are we just going to hit bedrock right away, and it's going to be a dry hole? And so that's another reason over at Osprey that was an issue that was considered.
Okay.
So what if this is a good spot? Does that mean we're gonna build this huge unsightly big well right there in the middle of
Huge
Greenwater Park? What does that
unsightly.
mean? What is the next step? Because this is Greenwater
Do you know what the
Park.
pump houses look like?
No, that's what I'm asking. What is it going to look like
It's-
in the park?
Well, it would be of minimal impact, actually. You have the well come out of the ground. We would probably have the actual top of the well. It could even be below what we call below grade in a manhole. And then essentially you'd have a little pump house there, which might be, just be a very nondescript building that people would look at and just think it's a bathroom or something.
Fairly
Say,
small.
yeah, 6x6 or 8x8 little cement masonry unit building, and yeah, that was something that came up. Plus, we're locating it thanks to Rick and also Robert. There's a bunch of trees where you come
that's
in.
what I was looking at.
Yeah, so part of that was for aesthetics. That it's shielded by those trees.
So how about, what if the highway was to expand, doesn't gonna interfere with anything?
As long as, well, Councilor Hadley, as long as it doesn't go over, obviously, you know, structurally, it doesn't run over top of the well.
Project, how much footage is there from
The right of way.
the right of way there?
So the right of way, if
It's
you
on
look
your
at your map, the highway
So
right of
this
way.
line is your right of way here.
I think it's quite a bit going
Yeah,
off.
so this here is the highway right of way.
The white line is the highway?
Yeah.
That's a good 90, we're
I don't-
90 plus feet from the
Yeah.
highway line.
I don't see it expanding at any, I can't imagine any reason. You can't tell the future, obviously, but that would be, you know.
Big growth in Oakridge.
Yeah, you know, one can always hope. One,
Okay.
so.
Any other questions? I don't wanna push you. If you wanna ponder just a little bit and make sure you've asked all the questions you need to, this is your chance to do that, so, and I wanna make sure that you do that.
So how are we gonna get it from here? Is it, I mean, if we were to put a well there, do you have an estimate of what it's gonna cost to get it where it's gotta go?
I don't, go on.
If you look to the east of the Pet Well site, you'll see a blue line that stretches across Highway 58 and then goes to a red arrow that's got an H.
Yeah.
That's a 6-inch main. We would run a 6-inch line from the well site to that, cut in a T, and you're connected to the system.
So the H on Odell or the H on Highland?
The H in Greenwaters Park is a fire hydrant.
Oh, this one down here,
Mhm.
down
The
here.
north.
Okay, got it.
So, a majority of the pipeline is already there, we would just have to put in a short chunk and a T.
Okay.
Just across the highway and back into it.
Yeah, no, we did, in some ways, it's pretty good luck.
long
You
as
have
it's
the
good water.
transmission, yeah, if you can get the water, you can just tie right into the existing system. And that is that 6-inch line I was talking about earlier that used to serve the whole park. But for the capacity of one well, that 6-inch line is fine. That's not an issue at all. And so, you know, you could have a decent flow coming out of that well, 500 or 600 gallons, and that could easily be pumped into the system.
Has anybody tested all the houses right there? Cause they got all wells across the street.
I've looked at the drill logs, Councilor Hadley, the ones that I could find, and you know it's all bank run, especially I forget the name of the construction firm that's
Davidson.
I think it's Davidson's, and they have a pretty deep well, goes down 150 feet, and you know I think they get 30 gallons a minute out of it.
But I mean, it's clean, I mean, it doesn't have.
Well, I hope so.
Well, I know
That's
that,
not a bad idea, actually.
I actually know that all of the residents on Odell Lane have had their wells tested, because of this issue as well as other issues.
Mhm.
And, I guess what I can say is I haven't heard anybody screaming at me, so,
Well, they're outside the city.
well, they are outside the city, but that is my question. Odell Lane does not have water, it's not annexed, it's not part of the city, but at some point, that may happen. Is there any reason to spend, never mind, I just answered my own question. There is no reason to spend more money to give water to areas that isn't in the city, correct? And I'm looking at you,
And
Robert.
Sooner or later, they will all have to annex, because
They'll have to.
the county will no longer give them,
Septic and stuff.
sites for septic systems.
Okay.
Once they
Mhm.
fail, they're gonna be forced.
They're gonna be forced to go into that.
Exactly, or they're
And
gonna have
then
to
we'll have-
move out.
We'll have enough water to have a big well.
You know,
Big
and
strong
they'll have to pay for new water at that point.
one. Okay,
So.
sorry. That's
No,
totally off the
no
topic.
worries.
Anything else, guys?
Well, thank you, and I'm sorry it was
you.
kind of long,
No,
but
no.
I just wanted to
We needed to ask
sort
all
of
the
start
questions
from
we
soup to
needed,
nuts,
and I
yeah.
think that's what the council needed. Save all your